Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Welcome to episode number 2 of Get Wisdom Live. Carl and I are on our new platform. Well, we're actually on a temporary platform. We'll be making another change probably next week as we fish around and try to find the best place to call home in terms of a platform. But for this week, we're on Webinar Jam like we have with the webinars and that Carl and Jenny do frequently. So we're just going to package it just like we do with all the shows that we do and carry on with our topic this week, which is Creator discusses the spiritual and historical lessons learned from professional wrestling. Who'd have thought, Carl, that Creator could wax for almost an hour's worth of material on professional wrestling?
Not me. I was surprised about this when you proposed this set of questions. And I mean, the questions helped me a bit, but the subject matter wasn't particularly appealing. And I think it's quite interesting that people, if they can stick with us here, will find this interesting in many unexpected ways. And we're actually bringing some new information forth to the planet as a result of this foray into the interconnections culturally and spiritually as well.
Yes. Life is a reflection of spirit, essentially. And professional wrestling is a cultural phenomenon. So we were curious about the culture, the underpinnings, the spiritual underpinnings, what's going on behind the scenes. What is this really all about? And turns out there's an awful lot to it. So we're going to get right started with it. You asked Creator, professional wrestling is a unique mass entertainment category. It involves highly talented and trained athletes, yet it is not really a competitive sport. It's more of a competitive sports portrayal or mimicry. Today, it is widely understood by wrestling fans that the outcomes of matches are scripted and known ahead of time by everyone but the fans. But as recently as the 1970s, this was not the case, and controversy raged about whether professional wrestling was real or not. Today, it's called sports entertainment, a category name adopted only after it became painfully obvious what the reality behind professional wrestling really was. This naked attempt to dupe the fans, even for entertainment purposes, seems spiritually problematic. What is Creator's perspective?
Okay, and this is the answer that I channeled from the Creator of all it is. This is Creator's words. Indeed, the entire spectacle of this sports mimicry is problematic. This is a remnant of thousands of years of deadly combat engaged in by human beings over and over and over again. In all cases, this is instigated by the influence of the interlopers, the dark demonic spirits who possess people, and the extraterrestrial interlopers who commandeer them as a weapon to undermine human beings and corrupt them to become more like the extraterrestrials themselves. It is because they are savages that they work so to make humans savage. It is a way of mocking the divine human for your spirituality, your essential goodness, your uplifting thoughts of love, and the gift it represents in so many settings, done in so many ways by humans left on their own without corruption. Many so-called sports are a combat mimicry in essence, in the way they are designed and the way they are employed, including the language and object of the game, to conquer, to defeat, to subdue, overwhelm, and dominate. It might not be lethal, but it can also be dangerous, and that too reflects the nature of the origins here. The gladiator contests were a quite striking pinnacle of depravity, to make an entertainment out of humans charged with the task of killing one another to see who would win. There could be no greater debasement of human life than to see it attacked and destroyed, while exalting the criminal conduct it calls forth. So the fact this is reflected in professional wrestling to this day as a contest of wrestler against wrestler to inflict harm on one another until one is defeated is already in its way a deception, because it is a manipulation of human beings to applaud and even enjoy such a spectacle that is non-divine in its origins and its implementation, even in the modern setting. The fact that this is putting on a show that also deceives the audience heightens the damage psychically in terms of the emotional effect. The influence it might have on human behavior of audience members and the consequences for their beliefs about appropriateness of physical altercation for solving disputes, from the very low level of morality on display. So duping the audience to believe it is real only makes it worse, because it holds it out not only real, but something of importance and a high standard worthy of emulation. This is a corruption any way you look at it, to debase human thinking that attacking one another physically to dominate and subdue them through force, using painful maneuvers and manipulations to make them surrender, is a lofty goal deserving of great rewards. This is certainly a throwback to a more primitive era of conquest done on a large scale and then enshrined with ritual killings like the gladiator arena offered on a regular basis. All who participate in such activities, including those who watch it as an audience member, are connecting energetically to a display that is not in divine alignment and will take all who participate out of divine alignment.
That's a pretty powerful last sentence, that by participating you're going out of divine alignment, which is problematic. It's not necessarily a condemnation that'll send you to the nether regions when you're dead, but it's not helpful. You're not doing yourself a favor essentially by partaking in this in a big way.
Yes, and it's good to know, because we do have a watchdog out there in the law of karma, the law of cause and effect. And when you go out of divine alignment, which is easy in the physical world we're a part of because of its competitiveness, its uncertainty, the fragile nature of our makeup. We're fragile emotionally. We're certainly fragile physically, and things can go wrong. And we make mistakes and we can harm others all too readily. And so we commit a series of infractions from the standpoint of a divine perspective.
Yeah.
So when you choose to do that, it's a more active participation in that misalignment.
Yeah, you're embracing it essentially. And I do want to make a distinction between professional wrestling and what they call amateur wrestling, which is wrestling, especially at the collegiate level. Amateur wrestling is real wrestling, where the two combatants are basically fighting with each other, not trying to hurt each other with moves that'll injure, but obviously trying to get pins and domination. But it's an actual contest, and the thing is that they usually don't last that long. A typical wrestling match might be 2 or 3 minutes, whereas in professional wrestling, they want to make money. That's the real motive, and so they need to be able to entertain the audience for 90 minutes to 2 hours. So they have to figure out how to extend these matches and bring some drama to them. So that's where it kind of became more of a mimicry and a scripted undertaking as opposed to an actual sports competitive, because the sport itself doesn't really lend itself to entertainment on its own. So it kind of had to be augmented. So that's the distinction between professional wrestling and amateur wrestling.
Well, you can make a strong case, I think, about whether even amateur wrestling serves a person in terms of their divinity.
Yeah, it's probably just it's problematic in its own right. I'm sure as problematic, maybe not, but it's still problematic. It's a question of degree at this point.
Well, that's what I would say,
Yeah.
because you dress it up, you do it in a in a gym, and they have uniforms. There's a referee that's reliable, that has
Right.
power and all of that, and the idea is to get on top of and immobilize the other person
Right.
and score points and so on. So it's a test of strength, agility, coordination, and proficiency in that particular demonstration of physicality. But it's only once removed, I think, from being able to overpower someone and shove them down to the ground, maybe
Yeah.
push their face in the dirt and keep them pinned and subject to humiliation and ridicule. This happens in schoolyards all across America by
Absolutely.
bullying and so on.
Yep.
So to make that a lofty pursuit, to see if you can get good at it,
Right. That's a good point.
there's something weird about it.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
bullying brought to a
So,
level
so
of
I would
admiration.
I would invite, before you make an assessment and a decision about it, I
Right.
would invite victims of bullying to weigh in. That's all I'm saying. So,
Sure. Absolutely. You asked creator if football is the sports mimicry of warfare with its plethora of military terminology and complex field strategies. Professional wrestling is a mimicry of the gladiator fight to the death matches held during the latter days of the Roman Empire. The interlopers are always attempting to corrupt humans at every turn, so it would seem they would rather see an actual return of deadly gladiator spectacles rather than watered down mimicry of them. Is this evidence of successful human resistance and human spirituality and human maturity as compared to Rome? Or, given enough time and desire on the part of the interlopers, would real gladiator fights to the death eventually return? What could creator tell us?
all right. And these are creators' words. We knew this question would follow in providing an opportunity for a kind of antidote to our seemingly wholesale condemnation of professional wrestling. But we do concede that the fact this is now a stage play where the wrestlers pull their punches, so to speak, to minimize the chance of serious, let alone deadly, injury, to make it a spectacle without a huge downside for the participants, is indeed a reflection of cultural change to move humans away from blood sports more and more. And this is an influence of divine intervention to lighten the hearts, raise the sights and standards towards divine alignment, rather than to give in to the manipulation done by the interlopers, who are bloodthirsty and savage in their perspectives. They enjoy contests of this sort, with fighting to the death and even torture as an element. So, to have a semblance of combat is far better on the part of modern human beings than a return to the days of old where fighting to the death was commonplace. It is still encouraged as an impulse by the extraterrestrial alliance, always seeking to darken humanity, encourage things that are counterproductive and harmful to people, especially in corrupting their morality, which irks them as they are psychopaths devoid of a conscience or compassion, and only prize having power over others. So, a more gentle representation, if only symbolically, as a kind of stage play celebrating hand to hand combat, is a step forward. The popularity of blood sports in general is a good measure of where things stand with respect to divine influence in this tug of war with the interlopers wanting to constantly drag you down and make you more like them in adopting their savage ways.
Carl, I have to think this is one of the more reluctant answers that creator has given to a question in quite a while, actually.
Well, it's not pleasant being the sort of the authority
Yeah,
to rain on people's parades and spoil their fun. I mean, I feel that way just reading the words
right.
and taking on this subject, because I know this is still a huge deal. There's many people who love watching pro wrestling and watching amateur wrestling. I mean,
Yeah.
this is an Olympic level kind of
Yeah,
athletic.
absolutely. It's an it's an Olympic event. Yeah,
Yeah,
wrestling.
yeah. So, but the thing that we're trying to get across is Where does this come from? And who says this is the way we should spend our time to exalt our physicality and employ it
in this fashion? Yeah.
I mean, there's many ways you can have tests of strength, agility, and athletic prowess. And the idea of physical combat, domination, and physical control of another person and their ability to move, for example, it's an invasion of sovereignty. Not only a test of wills and mettle, but this kind of physical constraint, which is unpleasant to experience. So it's not just points in a contest. There's a physical consequence that people feel.
Oh yeah, nobody likes to be subdued.
Yeah,
but that's the goal here is to subdue your opponent. So it's a little bit of a double standard in that sense. And the thing about this answer is, the question was really, hey, how are we doing? Are we doing better because it's a mimicry instead of the actual real thing? And this is where I said Creator was reluctant, because the answer was yes, it is better. But it's like Creator didn't really want to give us that answer because he doesn't want us being complacent. He wants us to recognize that this is still a problem. And it's kind of like, well, I don't beat my dog as much anymore. Okay, well, that's, I guess that's progress, right? But why don't you stop altogether is what you really want to say, right?
Yeah. So but this is just a question of perspective, but it's a rather important one, because the point we're making is not that, everybody should be wimps and nobody should be, a big macho guy or gal and want to physically dominate others and develop skills to do that. It's a question of what is the role of life and what is the relative importance of achieving that goal, and what does it mean about you and the other person? And there's many other aspects to this. And people who are not as physically endowed as others can't help that.
Oh yeah,
you don't choose the body you inherit. It just comes with the deal. Once you're born.
Yeah.
And so there's a basic kind of unfairness, and we've kind of looked at that issue in other settings. That being the case, the whole idea of competition is nonsensical.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be somebody who's a giant and massive and powerful and quick, and they're going to be better than you. Well, so what? We're not supposed to be better than others. We're supposed to be different than others, not like them.
Yeah.
And play their game their way necessarily, because maybe we have a different
wrestling
thing to offer.
Professional wrestling explores that occasionally by having storylines where the wrestlers beat up on managers. And the managers are usually little scrawny guys, they have no chance physically, so it's kind of really depraved in that sense too, when they go down that road. But U.S. creator Carl, talk show host Bill Maher had a number of guest wrestlers on one of his shows, and everyone expressed genuine outrage when he stated the obvious, that professional wrestling wasn't real. He also wondered out loud how healthy wrestling was for public consumption, pointing out that the solution to every problem in the wrestling world is violence. No matter what the problem, the solution is violence, right? The anger this question generated on the part of the guest wrestlers was quite startling. They somehow thought the question was unfair, and of course, none of them had a good answer for it. What is Creator's perspective?
All right, these are Creator's words. This is a good illustration of the dichotomy between a more normal human perspective and a state of becoming manipulated and distorted in thinking, to not only tolerate violence, even being mimicked and not truly real. Those in the trade, so to speak, not surprisingly, see nothing wrong with it and feel quite proud of their position in being involved in a highly valued occupation with wide public interest and acclaim to boot. But the conundrum that came to a head in their discussion was clearly the fact that it is questionable conduct with a questionable end goal in mind, to engage in a physical altercation with other human beings, an event in the real world more likely to be a consequence of criminal wrongdoing by someone, leading to their being subdued and arrested to remove them as a danger to society. When this is dressed up as a kind of play acting and not a real life and death struggle, it is still appealing to bloodlust. And normal people can rightly question the wisdom of engaging in or supporting such activities and wonder what good can come of it. It is quite true that what you spend time on will tend to be repeated and will grow. And this is especially the case for things offered by the mass media to the public. People only know what they learn and are most exposed to. It is far better to have good examples to follow than bad ones. One thing most people would agree on is that it is highly undesirable to have a world where people fight one another physically to cause them harm, bring about pain, subjugate and dominate them to make them surrender, to see who is strongest and most skilled in a form of combat. So to dress it up and confine it to an entertainment involving only willing participants keeps the activity itself, its goals, and its energy alive, and cultivates an acceptance and tolerance for violence unwittingly. We can assure you that everything coming through the media has influences on people and is often accompanied by subliminal programming. So this begs the question, what kind of subliminal programming might accompany a blood sport spectacle on television where someone might end up unconscious or sent to the hospital? What kind of encouragement, what kind of sculpting of inner beliefs might be the end result? We can tell you there is a routine disparagement and lessening of moral standards produced in this fashion by the low level of morality of the entertainment fare being offered.
I think it's quite noteworthy that creator calls this a blood sport, and that it feeds a bloodlust on the part of the audience members, and that's not healthy. That takes you out of divine alignment whenever you feed your own bloodlust. A lot of people say, "What blood? What are you talking about?" But this is what creators communicating here. The messages are not always pleasant to hear, Carl.
Yeah, it's a cultural heritage, and we're culturally conditioned to accept this as normal.
Yeah, it's an interesting take that lost my train of thought. But it's time for a break, Carl. It's a good time for a break. That's what my mind is telling me. And right now, you can check out getwisdom.com. Head on over there at your convenience. It's there 24/7, 365. And you can download our ebooks talking about the Lightworker Healing Protocol, Empowered Prayer, the 10 rules for the art of living. You can get these at getwisdom.com/LHP for the LHP ebook. You can get getwisdom.com/prayer for our Empowered Prayer book. It's a whole list of different prayers, from everything from health to finance to helping the world move forward and overcome our problems and save humanity. So it's all there. Check it out. And also our 10 Principles for Divine Living. Get that at getwisdom.com/10 TEN. That's getwisdom.com/TEN. And we will continue on with our program, Creator's Perspective on the Spiritual and Historical Lessons of Professional Wrestling. Carl, you asked Creator, in the 1980s, wrestlers widely adopted gimmick names in bigger-than-life roles. So you ended up with a cast of misfit superheroes with names like Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, and supervillains like the Undertaker and the Earthquake. They were presented as godlike men and had egos and arrogance to go along with the portrayal. It really seems this is the kind of game the Anunnaki like to play, adopting epic names for themselves and even changing them often. What could Creator tell us about the resemblance between the Interlopers and human superheroes?
All right, and Creator tells us, it is quite true that the Anunnaki relish physical combat and contests of all kinds, tests of strength, skill, agility, especially when they can end up wounding or killing the combatants. In the current era, the Anunnaki do not engage in such things themselves because they have lesser beings they can force into carrying out such roles. So it is very much akin to what you see on your TV screens with things like boxing and cage fighting, let alone the professional wrestling where the cartoon-like exaggerated trappings, mannerisms, and characterization add to the drama of the fight being displayed to make it more realistic. The Anunnaki pit other beings against one another as a form of entertainment routinely, and have done so all through history. That is the origin of the gladiator arena in ancient Rome and many other settings where combat is exalted, and when it is ritualized to make it a spectacle, all the more so. This serves the appetite of depravity, not a being in divine alignment. The interlopers like to see themselves not only as lofty, but all powerful. Lofty to them is the same as having physical power and domination in controlling others, and is the measure of their worth with their depraved perspective. Those in a position to dominate and kill others have reached, to their way of thinking, the greatest of heights in their society. That is why they have emperors, palace guards, armies, and underlings who they manipulate and control as a further reward for their exalted status. Indeed, it is the autocratic worlds of the extraterrestrials and their influence on humanity that brought about the very idea of royal families and strongman rulers given ultimate authority and power over the rest of the people. This has never contributed to the advancement of humanity, but taken away. So anything that mimics that power hierarchy is a departure from divine alignment that will lower your vibration and take you out of divine alignment and slow your progress in growth and learning. That has been the fate of the extraterrestrial societies themselves, that they are stagnating as they wallow in depravity.
Wallow in depravity. Wrestling kind of took a turn in the early 1980s towards more pomp and circumstance. And, Crater even mentioned the cartoon-like characters, they were a little bit around before the 1980s, but in the 1980s, that really exploded onto the scene. And it really, it's a good analogy. It's kind of a throwback to the pomp and circumstance of Rome, with the full coliseums and the trumpets and the banners and the parades and all that, all leading up to the contest that actually resulted in, it was a blood sport, the killing of the gladiators. And so in a sense, we're celebrating that unknowingly on the part of most people, and that's obviously problematic. The creator's pointing out here again.
Yes, and keeping in mind this history and what it's based on is very instructive, because we're not done with those originators of much of our culture, the extraterrestrials who really are controlling the world. This sounds bizarre to people when they first hear this idea, but we can tell you we've looked at this very, very carefully and explored it and probed it, and it fits all the data.
Yeah.
And this is just an example. If we're extensions of Creator's consciousness, why do we exalt and train and glorify beating up one another?
Yeah.
It's rather illogical.
And that's exactly what wrestling puts on display.
And of course, in a time of war, you want tough guys,
Right.
and maybe tough gals too, but because you need to survive. So there's been a place for this to help humanity keep going and to survive. But is that what needs to be? And is that what is the highest of human achievements, to live that way, where you've got to defend the walls and the parapets from marauders and so on? So when does it end?
When does it end? When do we get off this treadmill? That's probably the biggest question there is. U.S. creator, one of the iconic villain wrestlers was the Iron Sheik. His real name was Hossein Vaziri. Vaziri was born in Iran and became a national Iranian hero during the reign of the Shah, as wrestling is one of the most popular sports in Iran. Who knew, right? In his youth, he idolized Iranian Olympic gold medalist wrestler Golzemreza Takhti. Takhti was politically outspoken. Takhti reportedly took his own life, but Vaziri was convinced he was murdered by the Iranian government for being politically outspoken. When the Shah was deposed, Viziri, who served as the Shah's bodyguard for some years, immediately fled Iran, and he eventually landed in professional wrestling in the United States. What happened to gold medalist Takti, and did Viziri do the wise thing in fleeing his country? What could Creator tell us?
All right, this is Creator's answer. That gold medalist wrestler was indeed the victim of a staged suicide to eliminate him as a thorn in the side of the powerful in Iran, and as an object lesson to others who might dissent and seek to have some power for themselves, as in this case, becoming a renowned athlete and public figure. So his idol, who fled that country to come to the United States and parlay his interest in wrestling to a high level as a performer, was clearly seeing the truth of things and wanting freedom, was able to make his way to the United States, which has been a bastion of freedom since its inception. This is not simply words on a parchment put down by rebels of long ago, simply wanting to be in charge and taking up that role for themselves in opposition to the prior governance from the British royal family. The principles of the founders of the US were divinely inspired because individual liberty and sovereignty in all respects is a divine perspective that is only present in a few places on the earth and has been abolished throughout the rest of the Milky Way galaxy.
This is one of the shorter channeled answers the Creator has given for this show, but boy, is it one of the most powerful. I mean, it's Creator's literally saying here the United States is one of the few oases of freedom left, not just in the world, but in the galaxy, Carl.
Yeah, this is rather striking, and I think this encapsulates why we're doing this program and focusing on one cultural relic of outside domination by a savage group of beings who glorify violence, interpersonal domination, and power over others, even lethal power, and relish exhibiting it. So we're seeing the cultural consequences and how it is all intertwined with potential criminality and so on, when power is the currency for the way things are run.
So a surprising revelation from this is the fact that professional wrestling isn't an anomaly. It's really a display of the norm throughout the galaxy. This kind of contest is the staple. We're trying to get away from this kind of living. That's what our whole mission is all about. Because it's not love. It engenders a tremendous amount of suffering. And that's obviously the problem with it at the end of the day. You ask Creator, the staple storyline in professional wrestling is the babyface versus the heel. The babyface is the good wrestler who follows the rules and treats the fans with respect, while the heel is the evil wrestler who breaks the rules and treats the fans like dirt. Heels would engender such disdain from fans that the actual wrestlers faced genuine danger from enraged fans. Some heel wrestlers were beaten up and even stabbed, and some fans would even put drain cleaner and squirt guns and try to spray it into the heel wrestlers' eyes. This hardly seems like family-friendly entertainment. What are the karmic implications for both the wrestlers and fans in this theater of evil, where it's not the rules, but what you can get away with that counts?
All right, and Creator tells us, here you are seeing the spread of the basic premise represented by such a contest being a lowly endeavor, because it is a simulation of combat which leads to injury and death in its ultimate expression. All such activity is a karmic error that will receive a karmic consequence eventually. And this is true even of those who play act, because they are degrading themselves and putting on a degrading spectacle for others who are manipulated to seek and enjoy it, and cultivated within to embrace the seeming lack of principles involved in a winner-take-all physical domination of another human being, using pain for the purpose. The behavior of the fans is concrete evidence of the corrupting influence of the professional wrestling arena. It is not simply that it attracts people who might be violent and willing to assault others, but it will induce such behavior in the observers, especially if there is any kind of inner inclination to seek power over others and to have a strong desire for revenge and need a target to absorb their hatreds and bitterness. Such play acting scenarios often flirt with rule breaking as a form of variety. People find it interesting to watch because they can fantasize about themselves being in a position to gain the upper hand by doing something behind the back of a referee, or in the case of fan behavior, rising to the level of actual criminal conduct. People do not suddenly do something of that kind without preparation, without a period of learning and acclimation to not only tolerate violent conduct, but become a willing participant as a personal goal that will be experienced as enjoyment. That ramping up of excitement involved with wrongdoing is a characteristic consequence of mind control manipulation. People in a group do not suddenly run riot. It is orchestrated to happen energetically by a manipulation of those individuals by an outside intelligence, corrupting and influencing them from within their own minds. That mind control can make people do almost anything. And that is what you are seeing on display. When manipulated in this fashion, people will not question what they have done in the same way they might if it was a truly intentional, planned action on their part. They will have a feeling of detachment without a real understanding of why they acted in that way. This, too, is a characteristic of mind control manipulation.
That feeling of detachment, I think, is a little important to focus on, because in a way, that's how people will justify that it's safe to go watch this. It's entertaining, but I'm detached from it, and so therefore it's not really affecting me when it probably actually is, because the question has to be asked at the end of the day: why is that attracting you rather than a more uplifting form of entertainment? Why is wrestling more popular than opera these days? Good
Well,
question.
we heard earlier the suggestion that there might be something more going on. In fact, there is more going on with viewed spectacles like this in the media. They're programming the minds of the viewer. And
Yes.
what would the programming be for something that's an act of mayhem and maybe rule breaking and inherently in a kind of criminal way to violate the agreed on in advance rules of conduct and deportment in the contest and so on. And so this is manipulated to draw viewers as
Yeah.
well.
It's manipulated to activate the bloodlust that still reside within all of us to some degree or other.
Yeah, and it's very effective. I mean, I remember back in the 60s being in like 8th grade, and I found in professional wrestling on TV on Saturdays and started watching it. And I was kind of shocked by it initially because it seemed barbaric, and of course I wasn't a big hulky guy, so I was kind of the person who didn't see a lot of appeal in it because I saw myself more as a likely victim than a
Right. Yeah,
than a
yeah.
conqueror, but I still remember the day that there was a match and Killer Kowalski got up on the ropes after he had knocked Pepper Gomez to the mat and was lying helplessly. And Kowalski jumped on him, landing on his neck, and sent him to the hospital. And of course, we know now this was staged.
Right.
But I was truly shocked. And I just, because I was rooting for the good guy, because that's who I was, the
Right.
General Soul and so on. Well, this is an act of depravity because it warps the minds of the viewers.
Yes.
And that's the purpose of it, to promote savagery and the tolerance of savagery. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And when you were 8 years old, Carl, wrestling there was more of a debate about whether it was real or not. Now everybody knows it's an open secret, but back then there was real. People had a lot of people believed it really was real, and it was encouraged to believe that.
I thought it was real.
Yeah.
The ambulance came and they made
Yes,
a whole big deal. They stopped the show and, put him
they
on the
still
stretcher. And,
they still do.
well,
To
hey,
this day, the ambulance gets a lot of money from the pro wrestlers.
well, I'm glad to hear the tradition lives on.
The
What can I
tradition
say?
lives on. What can I tell you? But make a new tradition for yourself. Visit getwisdom.com instead, where you can also check out our healing services. You can engage a practitioner that has a deep belief quotient and can bring effective results to you or to your loved ones. So you can get the results without necessarily having the belief yourself. You can hire a practitioner who can take on whatever issues you have and bring divine healing to bear. It's very powerful, Carl.
And it also works in parallel to save and heal humanity. Let's not leave that out, because this is job one. And
Yes,
it's why all of us are here. We're here to solve the problem of evil. So this is
absolutely.
what we're doing to help enlighten and help awaken people to the dimensions of the problem, where it's coming from, and the tools that provide the solution.
Yeah.
But people have to act on our recommendation and embrace these tools and use them. And that's the piece that's still not in place. We need
No,
more people
need more people.
to work on it.
Getwisdom.com. U.S. creator wrestler Rowdy Roddy Piper died in his early 60s, saying multiple times that he would not make it to age 65. So he had a kind of a premonition. One day after he died, Hulk Hogan, a famous wrestler, got a cell phone call from Piper that said, "I saw the light. I'm walking with Jesus, my brother, walking with Jesus, loving you and praying for you." And in fact, I have that exact call right here, and we'll play it for you right now.
I saw the light. I'm walking with Jesus today, my brother. Walking with Jesus, loving you and praying for you.
Hogan shared this message in a biographical documentary of Piper. And boy, I can tell you from my own personal experience, Carl, it sure sounds like him completely. Roddy Piper was one of the most volcanic personalities in the history of professional wrestling, yet he appeared to make it to the light on his own. Was this call genuine? What can Creator tell us?
All right. And this is Creator's answer. Here is perhaps an ultimate irony that these figures, having been part of an orchestrated phony entertainment, participated in a genuine miracle of communication from the divine realm on the passing of this individual, wanting to send a message of reassurance and encouragement to his friend, and given divine permission to do so. As with all such miracles, they are personal and on a modest scale, and still leave ample room for doubt to not go against the free will choice of non-believers to reject the validity of the event in question. This individual, despite his profession, was actually very spiritual and in touch with his loving side. And that enabled him to pass without hindrance on his demise and transition fully to the divine realm. It was while he was in transition and accompanied by light beings that he was able to create this simulated phone call using his persona and mimicking his voice, because he was still close enough to the earth plane energies to interact in that fashion and carry out delivering the message. This is a good example of what is possible to create through prayer, and was the answer to prayers of many mourning his passing. As such, this is a good demonstration of all of your teachings at Get Wisdom, that the divine is real, it is accessible to you, and to partner with the divine is the ultimate expression by a human being that is possible. It is a kind of return to the divine realm while still on the earth. When you reach out to the Almighty in prayer and live your life according to divine principles and in divine alignment, you will carry a high vibration, and you can have a very direct interplay with the divine in all you do from day to day. It will be subtle, but nonetheless real. That is the meaning and purpose of this phone call, to provide an unmistakable example of such a partnership. The take-home message here is to not wait until after you die to see the light, but to reach for it now and partner with the divine to make divine guidance, support, inspiration, protection, and healing available to you and your loved ones by requesting this. You can also request evidence to validate your prayers are being acted on. Try this and see what happens over time. If your belief is sufficient, you will be shown that your thoughts and requests are truly reaching the divine and they are answering you.
You know, there's really a lot of implications to this, because on the one hand, Creator is saying that Mr. Roddy Piper, which wasn't his real name, I forget what his real name um, made it to the light on his first go. You know, there was no stopping. There was, no going past. He went right past jail, collect $200. He made it to the light right away, and because he had a spiritual side to him, and he was attached to he had a loving side as well, even though he had a highly problematic occupation. Now, there might be a tendency to think, oh, well, he made it, right? All is forgiven. It doesn't matter what he did, because making it to heaven is all that counts. Well, unfortunately, we're learning that's not entirely the case, Carl.
Yes, you determine your own fate with the choices you make while you're in the living. If you're not prepared to transition back to the heavenly realm and in a high enough vibration to make that possible, you'll get stuck along the way, and you'll be in the lower astral plane, cut off from everything, devoid of all your normal senses because you lost your body, and helpless. And you may be preyed upon by savage beings. So this is a pretty bleak picture.
It's a bleak picture. The point I wanted to make here also, though, is that his occupation was still problematic, and that karma still exists, and he'll probably have to balance that someday. Even though he's made it to the light, the problem goes on. It's not like the problem disappears once you make it to heaven. We want that, right? We all hope that, and we have many denominations and religions all over the world telling us that's exactly the reality. Yeah. That as long as you make it to heaven, everything else doesn't matter anymore. And we're told that no, it still matters.
It still matters, but the thing about this exchange and what it reveals is that in spite of his livelihood and what that might mean in terms of its value or a negative influence on the culture, because he's kind of aiding and abetting this idea of power being an ultimate attribute.
Yeah.
But there was a secret spiritual side that he honored and took to heart and acted on, and that saved him.
Yes.
So that to me is the take home here, that no matter what we do and how we make mistakes and we're flawed and do unwitting harm or even deliberate harm in a moment of rash action, we can still save the day and turn back to the divine and make up for it.
Absolutely. Well, we need, obviously getting to heaven is a huge, a huge endeavor, a huge goal. Everybody has it or should have it if they don't. I'm just introducing the idea, planting the seed that maybe we need to think beyond heaven, because we have a divine human project going on here, Carl. And just making it back to heaven is not what this project's all about. So we want to save our species. We want to save the project because there's a grander unfolding of the universe that is in the offing if we can do that. So just making it back to the light is fantastic, but it's not what we're after. It's not all that we're after here. I just kind of want to point that out. But to really incorporate that into your understanding, there's so much material you need to go over. That's why there's just, so much. We invite you to getwisdom.com to really start your own personal education on all these topics, because there's really a lot to consider here.
Yeah.
U.S. Creator, as usually, an unusually high number of professional wrestlers have died way too young. So much so that it's a wrestling cultural issue. Why have so many wrestlers exited early? Light worker healing protocol sessions have been done for many of them. Did most of them need a spirit rescue? Can Creator share how the Lightworker Healing Protocol is the best means of helping these departed entertainers, and how practicing empowered prayer is perhaps a better use of one's limited time here than consuming endless hours of such entertainment?
All right, Creator tells us the reason for the attrition among professional wrestlers dying so young is the same phenomenon seen in many other fields of human endeavor, where people become notable and are able to influence others. In the same way, the interlopers like a spectacle, they cannot resist pulling the rug out from under those who excel and attain wide recognition and acclaim. So even those who are serving their agenda in depicting mayhem and various forms of non-divine conduct to win over others, as in film actors and the many screenplays involving criminal doings, war, or manipulation of other people to take advantage in some way. Untimely deaths, in particular, characteristically have a lower than average likelihood of successful transition fully, allowing a return to the divine realm where one needs to go after leaving the body in spirit form. To be trapped in limbo is a dark fate that can be extremely unpleasant and result in a kind of imprisonment without being rescued. And the latter can only happen when requested from the human side in most cases, because the spirits tumbling alone in the darkness will lack the wherewithal to request help in a meaningful way, being in a state of dishevelment and limitation, and at such a low vibration, they will not see emissaries from the light wanting to reach out and escort them home. On average, 1 out of 3 people will meet such a fate on their passing, even believers in the divine, if their belief is shaky, or if they are too critical of themselves and doubt their worth to receive divine assistance. There are many ways people become trapped, and this is further encouraged by the interlopers when a departing human spirit is besieged by demonic spirits to attack them for their energy and enslave them as a kind of food source. They will torment to get more and more energy for themselves. This is a tragic and despicable fate that befalls all too many hapless human beings who do not take their need for belief in the divine seriously, nor do they take care of themselves adequately to be in fighting trim spiritually when they pass away. Ironically, one of the very best ways to build belief in the divine and in oneself as worthy is through using empowered prayer. The prayers recommended by Creator for daily use. They will help to build your faith, and that is a tremendous gain for the work of a few minutes each day. Practice makes perfect, and you will never need prayer more greatly than during your transition if you start off in an unexpected moment from an accident or mishap, or while impaired through illness that tips the balance and you suddenly leave your body without your normal senses to work with and are in the darkness alone and may not even realize you are dead. It might well be the fact that you are in the habit of doing daily prayers that brings the thought to you that it might be a good idea to pray for light to come. Now that all you see is darkness without end, that could begin the start of an awakening and a perceptible outreach from the heavens to save you. The surest way to remove inner obstacles to advancing in life, as well as beyond life in the physical, is to use the Lightworker Healing Protocol, because it is the premier tool for righting wrongs of history, having been subjected to many lifetimes of trauma that have never been healed adequately and remain as a karmic liability each time you incarnate. They will be an anchor hindering your progress and even survival for long as an incarnated human, and may well block your ability to transition back to the heavens. And if you spend a long interval of years in limbo, this will haunt you as well to make you fearful if you reincarnate again following an eventual rescue. The deep part of your mind will fear the nothingness, and that will drag you down during life to lower expectations and be a source of constant anxiety. It is tragic to not know these things, and especially so when there is a way humans can arrange healing for themselves if they know enough about what to request from the divine realm to bring this about. That is the purpose of the Lightworker Healing Protocol, because its power and reach can literally work miracles, especially across time, as it is designed to do, enacting again and again to continue polishing and uplifting and restoring what has been damaged. There is no better use of time and money than attending to your need for healing. It will pay many dividends for all of an infinite future that lies ahead of you.
So, I want to share a little bit, Carl, in terms of my interest in wrestling. So I actually worked at a group home for mentally ill adults when I was in the 1980s. And every Saturday there would be Wrestling Challenge on the television, and everybody would gather around and watch it. And at first I thought it was stupid. I was like, oh, this is, I got better things to do. But, I kind of got hooked, unfortunately, because it's kind of like watching a train wreck. It's kind of like, really? And then it has the soap opera elements all involved with it. It is truly tuned to be entertainment, and they do a good job of bringing you in. And of course, being programmed behind the scenes certainly helps that agenda. So I look back on all of that, and now I know what creators communicating in terms of the problematic nature of this, and I think, well, how do I take all this in? Do I feel guilty? Should I feel bad that I enjoyed wrestling for many, many years? No, I don't think guilt is necessarily the message here. And instead, what I've endeavored to do is to repay maybe some pleasure that I got of watching it by essentially thanking these wrestlers by doing Lightworker Healing protocols for the ones that have departed. Because we have learned that many of these early departures are actually stuck in limbo. They didn't all make it to the light like Roddy Piper did. He's actually an exception and not the rule, and most likely in these cases. So I feel good about doing a protocol for these souls that are departed. I did enjoy them, or at least followed them anyway when they were around, and I actually developed a little bit of caring about them. These people were part of my childhood, essentially, or my later, early adulthood, and they became a little bit special to me for that reason. So I care about these people, and people care about their sports figures. They really do, maybe more than family sometimes. And if you want to say thank you, what better way to say thank you than to do Empowered Prayer and Lightworker Healing Protocol for them?
Yes, this is, I think, an important focus for this segment, that we're in a world designed and nurtured along to cultivate a belief in competitiveness as really how we should be spending our time. But everything involving competition, and that includes the sports arena as a whole, is sort of inimical to divine characteristics and goals. What it does is it allows you to be different, and it separates you from everybody else. You're the winner. You're the ultimate. Well, you're going to stand alone, and everyone else is going to be among the defeated. So what if everyone used their energy, productivity, initiative, and zeal to come together and work in collaboration to commit works of greatness, to elevate and exalt everyone and everything, to make the world a better place, and not to make individuals a separate winner, right, and the rest losers. And this is, kind of turning the world back right side up. And it's a big dream and challenge to see that as the way of the world. But we have to start somewhere.
Well, they say a rising tide lifts all ships, and essentially we want to be in the vanguard of that rising tide. We want to help move humanity forward to a grander existence. And this is promised by Creator, that if enough people get on board, and we need you to get on board, getwisdom.com, Lightworker Healing Protocol, getwisdom.com/LHP, learn about it, learn about everything that's going on in terms of our history and our future, and get on board. Help us out. Join today, getwisdom.com. That's all we have for the show, Carl. It's been
All
an
right.
honor.
Go forth, save and heal the world, and be well while you're about it.
Thanks, everybody.